Okay, you've been watching My Hero Academia. Maybe you've kept up with Dragon Ball Super because you loved DBZ as a kid. You might have caught the tail end of the Attack on Titan wave or have faint, haunting memories of some kid with spiky blonde hair and a bright orange jumpsuit. Oh yeah, Boruto's dad. But your anime education isn't complete unless you've watched the best incomplete anime of all time, Full Metal Alchemist. Wait, incomplete? What do you mean? Don't sweat it, I'm just getting metaphorical. Even if you haven't seen it, you're probably aware there's a show called Full Metal Alchemist that was all the rage in 2003. Perhaps you've heard of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which dropped in 2009. Either way, you should know FMA by now. It used to be one of the biggest franchises in anime, and it's a little hard to accept how long it's been since it aired. I remember it fondly, even if it has been almost a decade. And yes, I am completely ignoring the live-action movie that just popped up on Netflix one day. No, I don't want to talk about it. With a subtitle like Brotherhood, you'd assume the 2009 series is some kind of sequel or spin-off. I certainly thought that, but nope. Both Full Metal Alchemist and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood are separate adaptations of the original FMA manga by Hiromu Arakawa. Now, remakes and reimaginings of any popular story are unavoidable. Just look at superhero movies or video games. Even Halloween 2 is getting replaced in the Halloween canon almost 37 years after its release. But shows don't usually get remade so quickly, especially anime. Although I can probably name some others off the top of my head if I really tried. But why did Studio Bones give us 2 Full Metals? Short answer, it was extremely popular. Long answer, when the first show came out, roughly only a third of the manga had been released. Typically, when this happens, shows will either do years of on and off again filler, like Naruto. Sometimes show will go on hiatus and resume making new episodes when there's more to animate, like My Hero Academia. The first FMA went with the rare third option of using the original manga as a base and going off with an original story with a few original characters for over half its 51-episode runtime. The fans loved the anime and didn't care about it being different. Due to its popularity, when the manga began to wrap up in 2010, Bones launched a 100% faithful adaptation, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. And that is where the magic is in Full Metal Alchemist. The series itself is an experiment in alchemy. The first series combines 2 visionary creators' visions and results in a stirring, compelling, and emotional story that's completely unique from Brotherhood. What we see on display with these series is 2 amazing stories built on the same foundation that blossomed in 2 entirely different directions. It's a fangirl's dream. I mean, this is basically fanfic made real. I get to see the characters I love interpreted through different lenses with a different creator at the helm. Brotherhood took me back to a time when I got together with my after-school anime club to watch Full Metal Alchemist and analyze and have debates over what went down. It helped me capture that feeling of consuming something so good that I loved so much that I wanted it to go on forever. And with Brotherhood, I got to feel that way again. So why was the franchise so beloved? Look no further than Edward and Alphonse Elric, 2 young brothers with an absent father and a deceased mother. In other words, a recipe for an emotionally fraught anime. In this world, alchemy, the science of changing one thing to another, is a widespread phenomenon. The world's greatest taboo, trying to resurrect the dead. So of course, after their mother's death, that's the first thing you can guess Ed and Al attempt to do. Edward loses an arm and a leg, Alphonse loses his entire body. And a few years later, Ed joins the State Alchemists, part of the military in the country of Amestris, and the boys set out on an adventure to find the elusive Philosopher's Stone. This object of legend supposedly has the power to grant the user immeasurable power, the ability to break the law of equivalent exchange. Don't know what that is? It's okay. Equivalent exchange is explained in just about every episode of the show. That's the basic setup for all iterations of Full Metal Alchemist. We have Edward, who's honestly more of a Bakugo than a Deku, and his much more respectful big little brother, Alphonse. Oh, and yeah, Alphonse is a big suit of armor now. No big deal. And how could we forget the dozens of other beloved characters this series is known for? From the miniskirt-loving Roy Mustang and muscular, passionate Armstrong, to the various homunculi who serve as FMA's bad guys, fans adore FMA for this colorful, eclectic, and genuinely diverse cast. In its heyday, you couldn't go 2 steps at any anime convention without seeing hundreds of Full Metal Alchemist cosplayers. Every fan you knew had their favorite character and would fight you over it. Personally, my family have been devoted Alex Louise Armstrong fans for generations. For generations. However, A memorable cast isn't the FMA franchise's only strong point. Both iterations of the show cover a slew of adult, real-world themes. They're presented in a way that's accessible for teen audiences without pulling any punches on the more challenging subject matter. Early on, Ed and Al are confronted with the death of their mother. The show constantly touches upon God, or the lack thereof, with its first episodes revolving around a false prophet. Scar and the Ishvalans, exiled people from a nation destroyed by war, are a very real-world parallel of racism, genocide, and the war in the Middle East. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. While plot points and certain topics are handled differently between FMA and Brotherhood, both shows respect their audience enough not to cut corners with their narrative nor their messages. So why are we telling you to watch both? If they're both filled with wonderful characters and a genuinely deep story, wouldn't it make sense to just watch the one that follows the manga and has nicer animation? The original TV show that lit the immortal fame of the FMA fandom aired in Japan in 2003. Its release on Adult Swim just a year later changed everything. Believe it or not, this was before the West had Naruto, Bleach, and Death Note. Fans were hungry, and Fullmetal Alchemist jumped through the kitchen doors with a hot 3-course meal. Up until then, the idea of a shonen show was limited to Dragon Ball Z and similar fare. FMA was really the first teen-oriented action anime to be jam-packed with a dense story, complex ideas, and some truly three-dimensional characters. The cast really shines in the original. With so little of the manga out, the original takes its time with the early arcs. You really get to walk in Ed and Al's shoes, experiencing all the shorty jokes that Ed puts up with. Relatable. You feel what they feel. For example, the corruption in the small town of Usewell takes one full episode to explain. You learn of the crooked military leader Yoki, who imposed heavy taxes on the residents in order to bankrupt them. And you go through the Elric brothers' plan to overthrow him. Brotherhood doesn't even have an episode about Yoki's origin, and instead has a throwaway line to explain what happened. Not to mention, Yoki becomes a pretty important character in Brotherhood, so the lack of any sort of origin episode is an interesting departure. In episodes 6 and 7 of the original, the brothers Elric are introduced to show Tucker, and find themselves in his office. The episode takes its time connecting the audience with Tucker's dog and daughter. Later in the episode, these two are nowhere to be found. But look, there's a brand new chimera who can talk. Brotherhood covers this same incident, but because FMA 2003 had time to let the scene sink in and give audience hope, the end result is more haunting. Fans still aren't over it. I'm not over it. We can't list all the differences between the two shows, especially since more than half of FMA is its own thing. However, the anime writers handle the homunculi in a really interesting way. They are all remnants of people who've died that others have tried and failed to resurrect. We shouldn't spoil the details, but this adds an extra layer of tension and depth to the homunculi and their fight with our heroes and allies. The stakes become more personal, more twisted. Look at the Elric's mother. Look at Sloth. I think the original digs the character knife just a little bit deeper. So what about Brotherhood? Why am I telling you to watch that too, when your watch list is already super long and we both know you're never gonna get to Uma Musume Pretty Derby? Well, for one thing, life is long, and I fully support you eventually watching that horse girl anime. But Brotherhood isn't that long at 64 episodes, and it's gorgeous. While Studio Bones, who also does My Hero, always brings good-looking animation to their anime, they really let loose for Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Knowing it would make money, they decided to make Brotherhood a weekly event. Let's look specifically at episode 19, which is past the territory where the two shows split, and a few episodes after the murder of a very beloved character. Roy Mustang is pissed, and he's on the hunt to find out the truth. This leads him to Lust, the very first homunculus we see. Honestly, the show speaks for itself here. Just look at these cuts. Of course, that fight plays out how it did in the original manga, just as the rest of Brotherhood does. All the little details and tidbits Hiromu Arakawa throws into the beginning of the story play out to their full potential in the show. Not that we don't think that the way the first Fullmetal Alchemist handled its plot is bad, it's definitely enthralling on its own. But here, we see the rich story play out as it was originally intended. Everything is connected. From the Ishvalan's war, to interference from Xing, to the person who created the homunculi and their relationship to the Elrics. There's almost no fat in the story of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. It's arguably the stronger narrative experience, and fans who really love a good story will sink their teeth into it. Finally, there are some characters exclusive to Brotherhood who are incredible. For starters, episode 32 introduces the chillingly powerful Olivier Mira Armstrong. Yes, older sister to that Armstrong. She's tougher than her brother and will put a sword through you just because she wanted to. Just watch her take on Brotherhood's Sloth, a hulk of a man in episodes 34 and 35. Another standout exclusive to Brotherhood is Whimsical Ling from Jing, who first appears in episode 15. He's on the hunt for immortality, which leads him into his own crusade against the homunculi. While he's always been entertaining, a certain change midway through the show turns him into one of the most interesting characters the series has to offer. So, why do you need to watch both? The first Fullmetal Alchemist has amazing charm and characterization. Not to mention, it sparked the series' popularity in the first place. As we mentioned before, the original also covers the earlier arcs more in depth, without really skipping necessary information. You get more episodes dedicated to character and world building before the story hits its stride. Characters like Rose, Nina, and even Mace Hughes are given time to develop. That makes an argument for a slower pace with careful character building. Sure, not every story can spend so much time introducing us to characters like Mace, only to entirely f us up when he... Let's just say I was destroyed. And that attachment to Hughes is absolutely crucial. In Brotherhood, Hughes is cool and all, but in the original, he's critical to the development of another character, Roy Mustang. Brotherhood assumes that you watched the original, so it breezes past these early episodes to get to the less explored parts of the story. Remember how I was saying that Fullmetal Alchemist is incomplete? Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. You need the original to fully appreciate Brotherhood, but both will pull you into this world and make you fall in love with the characters. Because they're not just characters, they feel like real people. And we can thank the two adaptations for their multidimensionality. The two series give enough space to all the characters that even the villains have strengths and flaws, clear motivations, and important relationships. What other anime makes you love villains so much? Scar and Greed are both responsible for doing terrible things, but they still worm their way into your heart by the end. There is one area, however, where the original treads completely new ground from what we see in Brotherhood, and that is the movie, Fullmetal Alchemist: Conqueror of Shambhala. This movie serves as a direct sequel to the original show, and it's brilliantly wild and wildly brilliant. The brainchild of director Seiji Mizushima and famed writer Sho Aikawa, the movie goes to unimaginable places. It takes a few of your favorites, turns them on their heads, and leaves you to deal with the results. Us saying anything about it would spoil both the movie and the show. But check out what happens to Gluttony for a second. Brotherhood also got a movie called The Sacred Star of Milos. While nicely animated, it mostly reads as filler, with no real impact on the main story or cast. To condense The Sacred Star of Milos into one sentence, it takes the main bad guy's plan from Brotherhood and just remixes it. Like, imagine if the next Infinity War movie just has Thanos snapping again, but there aren't that many people left to kill anymore. So he only kills a quarter of the galaxy's entire population. Not to mention the Sacred Star of Milos takes place, somewhere in between some part of the story. It's just not memorable. With the inclusion of the Conqueror of Shambhala film, one could argue the story of the original anime is as rich and worthwhile as Brotherhood, despite the different endings. That's why you need to watch both, to get the complete picture of everything Fullmetal Alchemist could be. Think of it like alternate universes, or a video game where your choices affect the story and the outcome. Sure, we start in the same place, the small town of Resemble, where Ed and Al try to resurrect their mother, but the identities of the homunculi are different. The reasoning for how events have been set in motion is different. What's behind the gate is different. The trials and tribulations that shape Ed and Al, and even the likes of Scar, Roy Mustang, and Führer Bradley are meaningfully not the same. I'm Cristal, and you should totally watch Fullmetal Alchemist and Brotherhood. This is Get in the Robot, your anime watch list.